Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this APMG webinar in partnership with Capability for Change. My name's Mark Constable, and it's a pleasure to be joined by all-round change management guru Melanie Franklin, who's the CEO for Capability for Change. And today we're hoping to share some really great insights for you from the most recent Capability for Change survey. So that's something that Mel leads at the organisation. It's been going for a few years, and it gets input from organisations and change management practitioners from around the globe, representing a variety of organisations and industries. So no doubt we're going to have some great insights to share with you today, which I'm sure resonate with some of your change management practices and challenges. So before we get into that, just a few bits of housekeeping to cover. First point is you just heard me start the recording there, so we are recording the session, and that will be available to everyone soon after the conclusion of the webinar. I do look up for the follow-up email, which will include a link to the recording in that, and that should be with you within a couple of hours after we finish. Secondly, you can submit questions at any time. We welcome the interaction. Mel loves to answer your questions as we go and towards the end. So do get those in via the chat function or the Q&A function. We'll keep an eye on those as we go, and we'll try to address as many as we can in the time that we have. And last but not least, we welcome your feedback on our webinars. That's always helpful when we're planning and delivering these sessions in the future to make sure we're hitting the right note and giving the content that's really useful for you. So do get that feedback in, and you'll have my email address from the follow-up email. So welcome any feedback. So that's about it from me. So without further ado, welcome, Melanie, and it's over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, if you've got any questions at any time, Mark reads the chat and just put your comments in, and he'll interrupt me when you need to get something across. I have put on here the link to the full report. What you're going to find from this survey today is I'm going to be pulling out some of the commentary and some of the insights that I had when I was putting together all the results in November and December. So this is very much a personal take on what is this teaching me? What do I need to be sharing? What points can I make in the boardrooms to maybe get change more recognised and more supported? So first of all, one of the things I do is I cross-reference all of the data from our survey, which has been running for 3 years now. And obviously we'll be hoping that you will also sign up to answer the survey when it opens again in September of this year, which isn't that far away. But I cross-check with all of the big CEO surveys that are going on around the world. So we have big tech companies, but also the traditional consultancy organizations that have their surveys. And it pulls out interesting points that reiterate some of the things that we're going to find in here. So 43% of CEOs in an IBM survey, and I put a link in there to the survey, are talking about increasing the tempo of their organization's transformational change, compared to 19% who said it would slow down. So 43% are saying it's going to speed up. Aren't you in an organization that is already overwhelmed by the level of change? I mean, we've been having a laugh in this office this morning because we are making so many changes in our own organization that we're laughing because it's hysterical laughter, because we just can't get a grip of all of the changes and where we are with everything. We've been making technology changes, we've been making process changes, we've been making changes to our financial arrangements. Good grief, we just can't keep up. So when you see 43% of CEOs think, oh, we can increase the pace, I'm thinking, you're kidding, aren't you? Something else though, 2/3 of them are talking about AI success and recognizing, I find this really interesting, recognizing that the success of any adoption of AI will rely on people's adoption, i.e. behavior change, and not just on the technology and the functionality of the technology. So that will come out in some of the results we share. Something else, the PwC survey talked about 35% of CEOs believe the workforce needs retraining and reskilling. That's from 6%. So a massive leap in terms of the amount of upskilling. Why in change does that catch my attention? Because we know that when we talk about retraining, reskilling, we're talking about a massive amount of behavior change. We're asking people to give up their existing sort of knowledge, experience, status, and basically be willing to almost start from scratch again and go, hey, I need to rebuild what I know. It's a massive undertaking at a time when people are already incredibly busy. So it's all very well saying, oh, yes, we're going to need to do some retraining because of AI and other digital transformations that are coming in. But where's the headspace to be able to do that would be a question. And also customer needs are changing. So there is this external pressure that we're more and more demanding all of the time. And we get ourselves in this loop, don't we? If we have a really good, perhaps digital experience with one organization, we kind of expect it to be translated to other organizations. We hold them then to the same standard. So when we've had a great experience of something, we ordered in on our house last night a takeaway. When we can see all the steps that it's gone through, but we can also see that it's been picked up. We can see the name of our moped driver. We can see where our moped is that's going to be delivering our food to us. So when I'm submitting some information through to the tax office and I cannot see that they've received it, I get no acknowledgement, and I can't see how far through the processing it is, I get incredibly frustrated. So it's not a surprise that customer needs are changing. We're comparing all the time and becoming more and more demanding, which of course leads to more change. So there wasn't anything in the CEO surveys that discounted what we're about to see. In fact, actually, it gave reasons for and strengthened some of the points. The who answers the survey? Well, it is truly global. We saw some of the numbers go down this year from places like South America and the Middle East, but we actually saw 3% coming in from Asia, which might not sound much, but actually I've noticed over the last 12 months that there's been a huge growth in change roles, for example, in India, whereas before, with the outsourcing model that dominates so much of professional life in India, the change managers, change professionals were not there. They were back in the companies in the US, in the UK, and across Europe who are using the services provided by many of the consultancies and tech companies in India. Now we're starting to see those organizations are actually starting to bring on their own change manager roles and taking responsibility for how they make change happen in their organizations. So that's a bit different. One of the reasons that it sort of fell in places like South America and Middle East is that I did not do any sort of personal inviting to the survey this year at all. And we just allowed people to find it if they could. So what we found, 13% in North America, 12% in Australia and New Zealand. So that quarter of the results, really useful. Half comes from the United Kingdom and then the 12% across Europe. And then the rest of the world makes the rest up. One of the things to think about, though, is this. When we dig under the results, there really is no difference. There really is no difference between countries. It doesn't matter where you are, basically, in the world. There is a commonality on the experience that you are having. And the other thing to say about the respondents of the survey is, wow, what a wide variety of job titles we actually get. But one of the things you will hear me say is that 86% of the respondents are responsible for change. So, in other words, if you have a responsibility for making change happen in your organization, irrespective of what your job title is, you will find that the results of this survey come from your own tribe. We know that in change, we have a massive issue with the job titles. The breadth of job titles actually, I think, makes it much harder for senior leaders to understand what it is that we do. We facilitate between words like change and transformation for a start. We also have things like adoption, delivery, and transition floating around in there sometimes in our job titles. We have business change or just change. We have a whole load of other roles and responsibilities that are involved in change. I think we've just got a mess. As a profession, I will say that I think that lack of clarity does not help us. So let's have a look at some of the key things, right? What are the changes and what's the, compared to 2023? Well, coming up strong, increasing digitization. But we also put something else in. Sorry, I can see that it's put off down the bottom because I have to transfer it to the CAPMG template. But adopting artificial intelligence there in the middle was a new one for this year, and that's just over 40%. And so alongside the idea of increasing digitization, some people have pulled that out specifically because people could answer as many as they wanted to on this slide. But we'll see the top two, increasing digitization and increasing operational efficiencies. And we're starting to see that, there's a big internal driver for change. I think this is really interesting that actually, as far as sort of what's driving it, some of the things that are missing from here. Um, the results for this came in before Trump got back into the White House. But even so, there was very, very few that were about diversity and inclusion initiatives, and even fewer which were about the sustainability of the supply chain and increased sustainability across the organization generally. So um, interesting that those more external factors are not driving change. There's a huge amount about internal factors. And certainly since the start of the year, also going back to some of the respondents, we're seeing that the reorganization seems to be increasing. The pace, the frequency of reorganizations higher and higher all of the time. Um, how do we measure the success of these change initiatives, whatever they are? Now, start, you think, oh, this is all right. People adopt the new ways of working. That's the top measure. Yeah, we're measuring adoption. Oh, that's good. And then I start to think about it, go, this is really bad. The reason it's really bad is that the organization is more productive or successful, the customer and staff satisfaction, the next two actually should be the strongest. Why? Because people adopting the new ways of working is just as bad as completed on time and completed on budget. It is basically, it's an indicator of how we've managed the change, but it's not really an indicator of success of the change, is it? We've got to differentiate, I think, far more clearly. There is a difference between the metrics that we measure that say that actually we're managing the change effectively and whether or not the change is having an impact. So, is the organization more successful in whatever way you want to caveat that? I mean, it could be characterize that, sorry, it could be revenue or profitability. So, it could be a numbers driven piece. It could be around, as we see here, staff engagement, satisfaction, customer satisfaction. Um, what are the real indicators that actually having made this shift, having achieved this change, we've achieved some benefits for the organization. So that people adopt the new ways of working, just think, oh, good grief, there's over 80% of us are seeing that as a measure of success. No, it's not. It's a measure of how we're managing the change. So it's a measure of our professionalism. Lovely. So is completed on time, completed on budget, and anything else of that nature about how we manage the change. The impact of the change is what we've got to get. And we'll see this in benefits in a moment when I'll draw back to this subject because it's, I think, a key theme. It's a capability for change survey. So why do organizations want to build the capability for change? Um, I think it's encouraging that organizations are saying they want to accelerate the realization of benefits. So that is very much a senior leadership objective that they are there to realize the benefits of the change. So again, I go back to the fact that benefits around the organization being more productive or successful, customer satisfaction, staff satisfaction are actually lower than we're adopting things. So I think we're not. If there's a reason why we want to build capability for change, we need to make sure that we're talking the same story. So I think benefits and measuring is going to be something that dominates our profession this year. We've really got to get a grip of it. Another thing that I would pick out from here is we have coming up strong after that is ability to manage changing internal priorities. Something about staff welfare and stress reduction, reducing silo-based working. Coming back after that, though, a much, much smaller, only 30%, is about better respond to volatile market conditions. And again, slightly lower than that, faster time to market for ideas and innovation. In other words, the things that keep us competitive, the things that make a difference within our marketplace, they are much, much lower. And the reasons, the internal focus we've got for why is it that we're doing change, yeah, the reasons for building that change capability. So I think that's quite interesting because I'm thinking there's this internal focus, but what about the external benefits? Again, see the theme that I'm looking at. Barriers, always interesting. And I think you'll see this play out in some of the numbers that are coming out from the survey as well. So I'll pick up on this theme right now. Top barrier, change management activities not understood. How many times have we said, we are being pulled into initiatives way too late? much later than we can actually make a difference often. How many times have we sort of said through project management that we are seen as a team that perhaps communicates the change, does a little bit of the training. So we're seen as a comms role or a training role. Actually, the understanding of what we do to affect behavior change and all of the nudging, encouraging, using positive psychology, behavioral economics, neuroscience that we have at our disposal to help people adopt new routines, new habits, building the new norm for their organization. This isn't understood or recognized. So we're going to have to get better at explaining what we do. But having chaired the change capability community for so long, an argument that frequently is raised is we need to explain what we do, but maybe not all the activities of what we do. Maybe what we need to keep focused on is explain the difference that we make. So the difference that we make is that we increase the adoption rates, we increase the frequency of adoption, we smooth the transition. People lose less staff. There is less staff churn, there is less staff absence, there is less stress, there is greater staff engagement. These are all the things that if we're doing it well. So I think we need to start explaining what it is that we do in terms of the outcomes. But change activities not being understood, I think, has a direct link onto the next one that comes up all the time, which is there's insufficient senior leadership involvement. I mean, I was looking at I did the change management practitioner course. I trained that this week. And last week, I trained the Agile Change Coach and the Neuroscience for Change courses. And before that, the Agile Change Agent. So I've done a huge amount of training this month. People are desperate to get their certificates as the market is tightening. Certainly in the UK, we accept that. I heard a jobs recession being touted by the CEO of Manpower on the Early Business News earlier this week. But one of the things that commonly comes up in everybody on these courses was the fact that their senior leaders are just not engaged, not involved. Big discussion yesterday about how sponsors do not really understand what their role of sponsorship actually is, and therefore that acts as a barrier to them actually doing it. A lot of people sort of saying sponsors are there at the start, they make a big noise at the start, and then you can't find them. They're not there to take decisions. They're not up to speed on what is happening in the change. So even if they do take decisions or they open their mouths to communicate, they say or do the wrong things. So again, I think there's a link here. What we do isn't understood. That hampers our ability to create the relationship with senior leaders and help them therefore do their role. With insufficient leadership from senior leadership, that has a direct impact also on insufficient resource availability. Because if senior leaders don't really understand what we're doing, they are not going to commit resources, not just hiring people like us who really know how to manage change, but also to give permission to their staff to take on change activities, the willingness to build a change agent network and really properly invest in the training of that and the onboarding of people into that and valuing that skill set. Of course, it's back to change management not being valued. So I think there are some big links here between things. And then the last one of these that I'll do is what elements of best practices your organization implemented. Well, we've got King of Change Initiatives, Central Change Management Office, things up there. Let's draw our attention to the lowest scoring. And again, I do put polls in the change capability community. On LinkedIn, I often run polls, and again, it's borne out the same results we're getting. Person responsible for change is a board member, not that high. Person responsible change management reports to a board member. And all the others are going, no, that's not us. Look at those lines. They're around about 16, 17%. That's it. Less than 2 in 10 report to a board member. And these are all change professionals. So 86% of respondents are actually people who are responsible for the change effort within their organizations. So the reporting line is somewhere. I spoke to somebody this morning. She's doing a fabulous job, but she said, I'm sat in IT, and I've got a couple of levels between me and the CIO. And the CIO doesn't really understand what change is either. So I don't think he's representing the voice of change management on the board. So again, we've got these things tied together. Before I get into the deepest results, I will go off to Mark and see if there's any questions or any observations in the chat that you want me to come.
Yeah, we have got one or two. There's I think it's mostly comments, but I did notice one question. Our operation is spread over 22 locations. As a business, we struggle with compliance to change post go live. What what recommendations do you have to increase this?
So what we're saying is, I'm sorry, what are they struggling to do?
So we struggle with compliance to change post go live.
Okay, so again, it comes back to if you've got 22 different locations, first of all, ensuring that there is a point person in every single one of those locations that sees behavior change as something that they are going to take responsibility for. And that whether or not it's prior to or after go live, if there are changes to the ways that people need to be working, that's a big shift. That's a big shift in perhaps people's roles, the processes that they follow. So somebody's got to take responsibility for nudging and supporting them to do that, but also to make sure that that is captured in the policies, the standards, the KPIs, the role descriptions, and the quality management system they're following, and making sure that in every location, I don't know how much autonomy each location has, but in every location that needs to be followed up. So it sounds to me like it's about building a real network of change agents across those 22 locations. It's really difficult to do that. Even if it was 22 offices in the same country, it's incredibly difficult to do any kind of change without having a really great cascade network. Think of it as like the Avon cosmetics selling or, any franchise model. You might be there in the center trying to do change, but you've got to build out that network of people who are taking the message down further and further. So perhaps the building a change agent network would be something to think about there.
Thanks, Mel. That flows really nicely into another comment from a participant. So, which all love says, I find change agents help. That could be someone on the team who keeps the team continually engaged, trainings, tips,
Mhm.
success posts, etc.
Yeah, I'm always up to date with things. I had a conversation with somebody in law practice this morning. One of the things we were talking about, she's taken my Build Your Change Network masterclass. I called it Change Network, by the way, because sometimes it's Change Agent Network, sometimes it's Change Champion Network. Didn't want to be caught in the terminology. So I'm to beating the drum for the fact that we have so many words for things. Anyway, she took that masterclass and we were talking about she's taking all the contents from that and building a playbook for how she builds her network, how she onboards people, making sure that the training that she's got, she flows through to them. So having a playbook for how you build out that network and how you easily onboard people. Because she, like a lot of people I've been working with recently, is at the sharp end of mergers and acquisitions. She works for an organization where they keep buying other firms. In this case, it's small law practices where they're trying to get everybody standardized, and therefore means who they've acquired has to change their ways of working to fit into the new parent organization. So every time they make an acquisition, they have to make sure that in every location or every office for the firm they've acquired, there are change agents who are willing to roll out those changes. So I think absolutely, it's not just that you understand about change agent networks, but have you got a playbook for how you create yours, how you upskill yours, how you onboard yours, and how you keep it up to date and fresh? People who change jobs. So that's me. Ask me about that anytime in LinkedIn or on email. I'll give you more details. Um, Highlights, right? Key results really. When we put together the survey, we were looking at the dimensions, and we did an awful lot of research 3.5 years ago when we first put the survey together about the areas that we should question on, and therefore the survey flows through on these 6 areas. Which is, and you can see these: agility, approach, adoption, alignment, capability, and resilience, all very sensible things drawn across a huge amount of research that we did. What I want to say when I was putting together the results with Gillian Perry, my colleague, November, December, is what I had a moment of insight late November, which was what were the results really telling me? And the results were really telling me that we are not a valued service. think we all know that anyway, but it was just like, oh, it's really in my face now. And what I did, therefore, was instead of looking at agility, approach, adoption, etc., I just tried to find all the different places across the survey which showed me we are leaking away that value. We're harming ourselves where we're not perhaps doing things that we need to do. So that's what I'm going to take you through for the next half an hour or so, is try to make sure that you're as clear as I am that there are areas that perhaps we can develop. You can baseline yourselves. If you think, oh, we're doing brilliant in that area, build on it. But if you're thinking, oh, yeah, that is an area that perhaps we need to work on, you'll see that that connects to it's leaking away the value of the service you provide. And I am calling change management a service, needs to be a commercially valued service. You wouldn't run an organization, would you, without a finance service? We have finance functions that keep the money flowing in and out and all the bills paid. So, but we don't have a service that ensures that we continually evolve, we continue transform. And yet it's exactly what we are doing. And the volume of change we know continues to go up. You probably heard me say before, the old accidental question that Gartner asked in 2016 about how many enterprise-wide change initiatives an individual is exposed to was 2, and they asked the question again last year, and it had gone up to 10, so a 5-fold increase. But this year, well, a few months ago, so the end of 24, KPMG did a survey where they identified that 88% of enterprises, organizations, government departments, commercial organizations are currently running 2 or more significant transformation programs. 58%. And 54% are running 3 or more significant transformations. Another thing that caught my attention in terms of why we need this valued service is that I was looking at the zettabytes of data that as a globe we continue to create, looking at Meta and Microsoft and the fact that Microsoft are even bringing 3 Mile Island, the nuclear reactor, back into use. It had a bit of a dreadful accident about 40 years ago. They're bringing that back into use. They need nuclear power to power the data centers that they have. So we've got the number of zettabytes is increasing 20% year on year. So with all of that activity going on, that huge amount of evidence that we are transforming and transforming at an amazing rate, and also that 43% of CEOs want that rate to increase, that tempo to increase, surely we need a service that enables the organization to evolve effectively. So we're leaking it away on benefits because if we don't, we're just not talking in commercial terms about benefits, and that loses people's interest at the senior level. Portfolios, with the volume of change I've just talked about, clearly understanding and being able to prioritize the change initiatives we've got. So how do they link together and which ones should go first, which ones go next? Very important. Portfolio management has always been a keen bedfellow of change management, but still the number of organizations that are really good at portfolio management is very low. Leadership, again, we know that that's one of the areas that's leaking things away, and it just harms the fact that change is seen as something that senior leaders should notice of. We don't have enough resources. I was just on the phone with somebody who reminded me of a phrase I used last year, which apparently she's been quoting all the time, which is about the democratization of change management. Professor Cotter talks about having a volunteer army. What we are talking about is how on earth do we upskill team members, team leaders, supervisors, operational managers, line managers, people managers to lead themselves and others through change because they're at the sharp end of change. She was talking about the fact that they've got a very high volume of change. There's a couple of people in her organization responsible for change. So they are that link between the volume of change and the number of people that have to change. How can those 2 people possibly service all of those people? So they are, inadvertently, they are a bottleneck. They're under huge stress themselves, but it also means that so much change is going past them because there's huge volume. They can't possibly filter everything and support everything. So there is insufficient resource for change. Approach, we don't have, I think, a simple, intuitive approach. I was on a course this week, the change practitioner course, with somebody who was talking about the CIA, the change impact assessment. And I sort of said, I get that we talk about impact assessments and readiness assessments and all sorts of things, stakeholder analysis. To your average operational manager, that's not how they talk. Those things mean nothing to them. We want to simplify our language and simplify the things that we can get people involved in doing for themselves. So I think that if you're in any kind of central change function, how do you translate what you do to be consumable by all, rather than trying to make what we do look like a sort of complicated art form, is where we need to be heading. And then experience, oh, you're going to see I've got some stuff in here about making sure that the change is a positive experience. And if it isn't, then we're feeding organizational cynicism. And with the volume of change, that is massive harm for us. So that's my plan, to look at those things. Anything I should know before I carry on, Mark?
No, just looking at the chat, I can't see any further questions. There are a few comments, so if you,
Am I hitting the mark? People think it's what I'm saying is useful or not? Thumbs up if you do. I don't know if I can see you, okay. Oh yeah, yes, thank you. I can see thumbs up. Can't see you, but oh, that's good. Oh, love heart as well. Very much. Makes me feel good. As I'm the chief examiner for the Neuroscience for Change course, I can tell you what's happening in the brain chemicals right now, which is you are feeding me with dopamine. Dopamine is about achievement. And it appears with the clapping of hands and the thumbs up and the love hearts that I'm achieving what I need to achieve. That dopamine, that chemical reaction in the brain, is giving me energy to keep going. It's giving me motivation, a reason to keep going, because actually my brain will go, carry on, Melanie, you'll get more dopamine. And dopamine is highly addictive in the brain. So there we go. If you want more of that, come on the Neuroscience for Change course. It's an absolute blast. Anyway, benefits. Benefits bother me, you know that. We are just not measuring the right benefits. We're measuring whether people have adopted things commercially, with what difference we're making. Even worse than that, just over a third think that we're always measuring the benefits achieved from change. I mean, it wasn't a strong number in 2022, and it's gone down since then. So 37%. That's soul destroying, actually. Um, I was giving a presentation last night in the States, and one of the things that came to our attention, one of the things we talked about, we have no answers, but I want to raise it with you guys, is that those of us who are brilliant at change, we tell fantastic stories, we share anecdotal evidence, we inspire, we motivate, we encourage, we're always celebrating achievements and recognizing people's efforts. That is all about being a people person, being brilliant at it. And I do wonder whether or not those of us who are brilliant at change are drawn towards change because we enjoy that people interaction, that human interaction. And therefore, we are less likely to be of a more evidence-based, data-driven perspective. Are we good at counting? Are we good at numbers? I will say I'm absolutely not brilliant. I put a spreadsheet in front of me and I get really rather depressed. And so it's something that interests me now, is maybe we're just not natural counters. And so what we need to do to get the sort of respect for our entire profession is to start doing something that naturally we don't want to do. So there are some blockers here, perhaps, to that. I spoke to another, she's a naturally talented change manager this week, and she's brilliant. She said to me, "Oh my God, I hate it when I have to start putting the numbers in front of people. I absolutely hate the budgeting process." And I was thinking, oh, that's another interest. Somebody else said to me he had moved in the last year from a national retailer to an airline. And he said, when I'm in the board with a national retailer, I can do the telling them, sharing stories and examples of what we're doing in change. When I moved to the airline, it was all show me the numbers. And so he has had to learn a whole new behavior. And listening to him and learning from him about how he's adopted that behavior has been absolutely interesting. So maybe what we need to be doing is thinking of how we measure benefits. Something to think about, and we put in a new one this year, which is we check change as added value. So again, there's something there. There's a big difference, 19% difference between we always measure the benefits and we're checking that change has added value. So are we are we checking that we've added value, but more anecdotally, are we not doing it from a numbers perspective? So I'm just going to put in, there's no point raising things if I don't also put in for you an idea of how we might do it. And so it is thinking about what on the right hand side here does the business want to achieve? What will they value? Because if they're looking for sales increase, they're on a growth strategy. Maybe they're on an efficiencies drive. Whatever those bigger strategic objectives are, we need to be talking about how our change achieves those if we want more senior leadership to take notice of what it is that we're talking about. So, how might we achieve what it is they're looking for? So, we're thinking about new methods or processes, new systems. So, it's all about maybe streamlining, automating processes. And then we can start to think about how might we then measure those things. In fact, I mean, this is just an excerpt of a technique because we can work backwards and more and get into more and more specific measures. So, start identifying exactly the things we might be counting. The change capability community is going to be doing a lot more of this. Our March session is going to be all about, again, brainstorming all the little things that we might measure and how they connect back to the bigger, this one here on the right, bigger strategic improvement that we're looking for. So something to think if you are a member of that community. It's all free, so join the events. Portfolio management is a natural bedfellow. I want to draw your attention right now to some of the things that sort of stalled or we're not doing particularly well. The cumulative workload of multiple changes is tracked. Wasn't great before, it's kind of stalled, but the problem I've got with that is that the volume of change is increasing and we're not looking at the what I always think of as the totality of impact. I no longer, even when I'm training the change practitioner course and I look at all these individual models of change, I'm always challenging you to think, but how do they work when actually people are being affected by multiple simultaneous change? Let's not naively pretend that we're taking people through a transition from one way of working to another where nothing else is happening. They're being knocked off course left, right, and centre by all the other things that are happening around them. So surely we need to work more collaboratively with all of our other project and program managers around us, all the other change managers around us. We need to be tapping into what line managers, operational managers are doing for their incremental improvements within their own organization or their own team. That is also types of change that might not get into the portfolio, but it's definitely knocking people off course or introducing other priorities. So let's have a massive campaign here for being very clear and capturing the totality of impact on any team in any quarter. I think it will horrify senior leaders and make them realise that that's the connection back to insufficient resources. Again, change is being assessed for their interdependencies and particularly, I think, interdependencies and duplications, less about emissions, is something that needs to be increasing, not flatlining, because of the volume of change. Things that sort of bother me particularly, the massive fall in my organization's faster decision making. That becomes an even bigger problem when you multiply it by the volume of change that's happening. If we're not fast at decision making and we have to wait for a decision on anything, there is a backlog that builds up. You know, it's like waiting for the decision is acting like a dam and the water is building up behind it because there is so many other changes that are waiting on that decision. So actually, we need to be getting better at decision making. A lot of work I do with senior leaders is about criteria driven decision making. Identify the criteria by which you would say that's an okay or that's a no before you take the decision. So work out on what basis are you evaluating things. Share that so that lower down people can apply the same criteria as you. Not every decision has to be escalated to you. That's the kind of thing we need to be looking at doing. Half of us are prioritizing the changes. So in other words, what's happening there is instead of selecting, prioritizing is just another word for selecting, it being deliberate, isn't it? So if we're not prioritizing changes, then surely what's happening is that we are responding to change. We're just somebody comes up with an idea and we just put it in the hopper and we'll get on with that one as well when we get the time. So that does not sound like a recipe for success when CEOs want to accelerate the tempo. But yeah, they want to also realize the benefits. We've got the things that create and make benefit. And I think in change, we can contribute to that discussion and prioritization by pointing out how similar behaviors across multiple different changes are actually happening. So we can build the capability to something in one part of the organization that will help with a number of different changes. So we have to think about some of the ways that on one of my changes, we're asking people to be far more analytical. They were more data inputting, and now they are more data thinking. They're looking at data that's coming together from all sorts of different systems in their organization and going, what's it telling me? What action should we take? So we've actually asking people to do a slightly more complex role. So thinking about how we can look at that sort of upskilling and how that will support those behavior changes will support multiple changes, I think makes us more valuable. So maybe something we should be looking at doing. And only a quarter are optimizing their change portfolio. Well, if they're not prioritizing stuff, they're certainly not optimizing it. Here, we've got an issue we know with senior leaders. Senior leaders are held accountable for building change management skills. That keeps falling. Well, no wonder we've got a resource crisis then, because if we haven't got senior leaders behind the idea that we need to build skills in change management, then we are going to suffer with too few people understand what it is we're trying to do. Too few people can do it for themselves. So we're back to relying on a few experts, which does not match the volume of change that we have. I thought we dug in across the data and looking at leaders' role model changes and how that's been falling. And one of the sort of hypotheses that we've been trying out with people is that senior leaders' volume of work continues to go up and up. They just haven't got the time to be more explicit about the fact that they are also working in the new ways. They might very well be working in the new ways, but they just aren't demonstrating that maybe explicitly across their teams that are affected. They're just playing catch up themselves. Haven't got time to tell people what they're doing. They're so busy trying to get stuff done. But this, of course, is a massive impact. We know that leaders' role modeling changes is a massive impact for the overall experience of change. If they don't role model the changes, then what happens is that people believe change is being done to them, not with them. Because leaders, it appears that leaders are saying, do as I say, not as I do. We've got to pull it back around again. Now, getting senior leadership involvement, one of the things that I've been looking at, and it's an argument I'm quite happy to share, that I'm having a great deal of success with, is talking about to senior leaders now. You have two objectives with any change, not one. The objective they focus in on is that they have got to make a difference in the business, whether it's growth agenda, whether it's profitability and revenue increases, whether or not it's cost efficiencies, whatever that sort of more financial benefit or strategic benefit that they are thinking about. I will say to them alongside that, and equally as important, is the experience of change. Why? Well, I'm just going to put up a couple of things that I talk about. Successful change is both the achievement of those strategic benefits and the experience that people are having. If we have a successful experience, what that does for the organization is it breeds optimism. And optimism is about an energy and an enthusiasm. If people are having a good experience, they are acquiring skills about how they have led themselves and their teams through change. That builds their confidence for the next change, empowers them to take on more responsibilities, and certainly willingly. And that leads you to an organization that is what we're now calling in our organization the transforming organization. Because it's just a recognition that senior leaders are leading in an environment that is continually transforming. So they're leading a transforming organization. They're not leading a static one, are they? And in those boxes, we've put organizational agility and a culture of innovation, but equally you could have put we're a more customer focused organization. You could have put that we are we have excellent customer service. We have brilliant staff engagement, whatever you want to put in there, it's your transforming organization. If senior leaders fail to have a brilliant achievement during the changes they are sponsoring, well, why do they care? Well, you end up, instead of achievement, you get failed change, you get cynicism and distrust. So what happens is they have a poor experience that leads to ignoring the next change, which means change slows down. At a time when we know CEOs want to increase the tempo, it's not like a winning argument. Therefore, they're making less progress. Therefore, they've got low motivation. So that leads to a poor experience. And what that does is it's a stagnant organization full of bureaucracy. People do not want to take risks. They are going to follow the process, but they are not going to innovate in any way. And they have very few ideas. So what I say to senior leaders about why they should care about the change management experience and understanding what change can do for them is that I say, seriously, you want to shoot yourself in the foot. You know that you have multiple changes that you have to get over the line this year. So if people have a bad experience on one of your changes and you get the poor experience, ignoring the next change, slower change, less progress, low motivation, you have just shot yourself in the foot because you have just made all the other changes you've got to do so much harder, and more importantly, so much slower. And that seems to resonate. So it might be something that you want to think about adopting in your own sort of arguments, if you like. Coming on to the last couple then, when we're talking in terms of the results, skills and resources. Skills for change management are known and respected. Well, we kind of thought that they were falling, and definitely we can see that it's 13% off. And it was only half of organizations were claiming it in 2022. So it's got worse. There is, we've had a look back, and we put these to a panel and we discussed the results. And one of the hypotheses that's coming out is that in 2022, we were coming out the back end of COVID, where everybody was responsible sort of locally for their own changes. So there was a massive feeling that they were involved in change and that they were definitely sort of understood what change required and they were involved in it. And of course, as we've got further and further away from that point, when we've fallen back into more of our standard processes, it's falling away. So that's one hypothesis I'd share. We're developing change management skills, not really going on at all. People have time to adopt new ways of working is less than half. That's a staggering amount. And I think that's soft as well, based on other research that we do. And so 45% of people think that they can cope. And I'm going to bring up another figure now, where we think about our change management approach and how we do things. We'll have a look in a moment about the level of change that we do. If you just look down here, the bottom one, our level of change is manageable, is studying along the 40%, 4 in 10. So 6 in 10 people do not feel that the amount of change that they are currently experiencing is a manageable level. That's scary, isn't it? So people have time to adopt new ways of working, about 4 in 10. And our level of change is manageable is about 4 in 10. So clearly there's something about, wouldn't that go up, if we were developing those skills? Wouldn't that go up if people felt, oh, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and therefore they can start to become familiar? It's a behavior, isn't it? Being able to lead yourself through change and understand some of the emotions on the journey, some of the things that you're going to have to consider, putting aside time to practice new ways of working, thinking about how you're mourning the loss of that familiarity that you had, and that being a completely normal emotion. The more people understand the things we understand about how you lead people through change, the more we will have an available, as Professor Cotter says, a volunteer army. These are all going up on our change management approach. So perhaps they're not that high, but there is we believe that managing change is important. We just don't seem to be connecting the dots to actually investing in doing it. There's a few things here that I really am concerned about. We review the effectiveness of our change activities, and down the bottom, we update change activities with lessons learned. And then we track that our approach is followed. So there's something going on here. We have an approach to change. But we don't, about half of us don't review whether it's effective or not. About half of us don't track that it's being followed. And not all of us update it with lessons learned anyway. So we've got an approach, but we're not really taking a very professional approach to that approach. So we're the experts in change, and yet the 86% of people who answered this survey, who were all change professionals and responsible for change in their organisations. So it's around about the half mark that are doing this. That's encouraging. Okay. And again, the activities to manage change are known. I go back to, are we making it explicit and simple for people to understand what exactly is involved in change? I think it's just seeing these figures not climbing year on year, really not climbing massively. We review the effectiveness of change activities, and we that our approach is followed. It's just sad. Then lastly, as I said, down the bottom, our level of change is manageable. A few things that I would call out. It's great that we acknowledge and celebrate achievements, 3/4 of us, because we know that that's actually a very free way of building, just like you put your thumbs in the air and you put your love heart, and that gave me that dopamine hit. Yes, every time you acknowledge that I'm now working in a new way, when you celebrate that we've realized these benefits, and of course, the more we measure, the more we've got to celebrate. So that's a virtuous circle. So come to the Change Capability Community in March for that one. But what really scares me is people, those who struggle to feel to change, feel supported. So only half. And if the volume of change keeps coming, so what about the other half? Are they suffering massive amounts of stress? So I will often take that back to senior leaders and say, but don't we have a responsibility for the experience of staff at work? And if half of them don't feel supported during change, and change never stops, change is constant, then aren't we doing something wrong here? So that's an interesting figure for you. There's lots of stats in here that you can grab out and actually start to make the argument for, we really need to take change seriously. So that's all I wanted to say, except for I would suggest these next steps. I put the link in there to the full report. Share this recording that Mark's going to send you with others. Debate the recognition, the value of change in your organisation. Form a task force if you can to increase the value. So start pulling together your own grouping that really wants to take this forward. Remember that every couple of weeks on a Friday, I do a free online coaching session, 45 minutes. People throw all sorts of challenges at me. And for 45 minutes, it really means I have to try and find you some solutions. And I love doing that. And also the Change Capability Community, where we come together. Because I also recognize that change is lonely. You might be the only change professional. There might be 2 or 3 or 4 of you in your organization. There's not that many. So just trying to ameliorate the loneliness that we all face. So read the full report, take out figures that really help you make your arguments. That's what I'd say. Mark, questions?
Yes, I can see a couple. There's a lot of comments, and I can see just a couple of questions. So that if if you're able to just have a whiz through the comments, because you might want to pick up on certain ones in particular. But if I
Is this
find
in the chat?
yes, yeah. So this question from Matthew: is it best to assign resources and scope of activities based on a priority of a change initiative?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if we understand that something that we're trying to shift is really valuable to the organization, and we can mobilize our resources around that one, and saying to people, we'll get to your other changes, we will get there, but we're all going to mobilize around this shift that we need to make, particularly if it's an enabler for other changes, and you know that more if you are tracking the interdependencies and the duplications. And if I go back, because I always do, what did we say that we weren't doing? Changes are assessed, only less than half of us are doing that. But if we can say we found something where we know that this is an enabler for a lot of other things, we're going to mobilize our resources around that. What an amazing hit. It's a very agile way of working, isn't it? What an amazing hit for the organization, because you've actually achieved something that's very valuable to the organization. You've shown that it can be done. And that builds a lot of energy for other changes you want to make. So yes, prioritization is really important.
Here's a great one for you, Mel. How can we join the change capability community?
Just it's on LinkedIn, or just get hold of me in LinkedIn. I will be online later on tonight because I have to go and sit in a field while my dogs run around in an enclosed field. So send me emails or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will reply this evening between 7 and 8.
It was a good short comment here that I liked as well. Capability to change perpetuates itself.
Yes, it is a self-perpetuating phenomenon, I believe. It's a virtuous circle, is a simpler way of saying it. But yes, the more people that understand what change is and value change, the more they're able to explain it to other people who go, "Oh, I get that. That's important. Yeah, I'm doing that," and want to come on board. So yes, absolutely. That's why I'm saying to you, start talking about this. Share this recording, take an excerpt from it, and actually share it in your next team meeting. Absolutely use this.
And this is a good one to close out on. From my experience, managers do not understand the basics of change management. They just want to push the change to hit a target and damn the user.
Yeah, I think there, I think it really is important that we start to explain in very simple terms that what is expected of senior leaders. And a lot of the work I was doing this week was about exactly what I do with the change capability community. I run the community for you, but what I expect from you is for you to turn up to events and share your thoughts and ideas and try to bring in new members. So there's a give and take between us. Yeah, I will put on events, I will come up with speakers, I will come up with interesting subjects. There's a give and take. Let's have the give and take conversation. Yeah? Peter Block, in his research, called it the contracting conversation. Let's have a conversation where we set out almost the verbal contract between us. You, as the change professional, what will you do to support those senior leaders and make that incredibly reassuring for them? And what do you need them to do? Be very clear, be very explicit about what it is you need them to do, and perhaps block that into their diaries on a regular basis. In that way, but there's a word here, isn't there? Simple. Keep everything as simple as you can. Don't assume that people understand your terminology. If you're using terminology, put it into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to rewrite it in the language of a 10-year-old.
Great
I'm
advice,
going to
Mel.
go and get a glass of water now and have a bit of lunch. So
Yeah,
hopefully that was useful.
absolutely. I sure think so. If we got a couple of final slides, haven't we, Mel, as well? I've done a shameless
Oh, he
plug for
does
your
that all the
book, haven't
time.
I?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, a shameless plug for the book. As I said, I'm the chief examiner for the Agile Change qualifications. And if you want to keep your head above water, I strongly recommend the Agile Change Agent course. It will give you planning techniques for how you can plan to deliver value as early as possible so that every piece of value you deliver, you get support for what it is you're trying to achieve. So I strongly recommend the Agile Change Agent for that planning, those planning skills. The Agile Change Coach is very much practical sort of neuroscience techniques for how you actually make the influencing, motivating happen.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. I've put a little quote in the chat for folks to see as well. That's from someone who's a director of strategic planning, performance, and change about the book. So
Oh, thank you. It's a good. Oh, this book is full of practical tools and it guides the reader through the life of change from start to finish. Yeah, I had that feedback this week actually. The word practical must have been mentioned by everybody multiple times. It tells you how to do something, not what you should be doing.
thanks, Mel. And then one final slide. What I would say as well, we've talked about a lot of links here, and it's not easy. Well, you can't often click on the screen, obviously. So the follow-up email that I'll be sending within the next few hours, that will have all the links to everything, all the certifications we talked about, the reports, everything like that. So don't worry
And I'm
about.
doing a webinar, aren't I? Explaining all this, the qualifications throughout February. I'm doing four
Indeed.
30-minute webinars. So join me for that if you want to know about your next career moves.
Absolutely. So thanks very much, Melanie, and thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Hope you've enjoyed it. I've seen a lot of comments here saying great session and the like. So looks like you've hit the mark, Melanie, as usual.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. And just a reminder, look out for the follow-up email. And all I think's left to say is have a great weekend. So, and we
Thank
hope
you.
to see you
Take
on
care.
future sessions. Right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye.